Thank you.
All right. So, Michael, today's topic is about pitching investors and making them feel the risk of losing out. So, I know a bit of a follow up on last week's topic. And obviously, from somebody who's raised a lot of money back in the day, when you were building your business, anything that really stands out for you? And I know we'll get into it in detail. And then I think we also have a bunch of questions that people have been sending my way over the course of last week. So, I would love to get to those as well.
Yeah, nice to talk to everybody. I even last week and when people talk about raising money, people are very kind of nonchalant and they say, you just have to do this and this. It's hard. It is hard, and it is just one of the realities of the world. We read all the time about there's so much money out there, and we also read the challenges that face, the Black community and lack of capital. Regardless of what you're doing, it's hard. It's a hard thing to do, right? You're essentially putting together your entity, right? Your business, your idea, and subjecting it to this scrutiny, right? And I don't know about you, but in my early stage companies, did you ever walk into your first investment meeting and go, "Oh, we completely have our shit together"? No, because that's one of the reasons you need money, right? Is you don't have X and you don't have Y and you don't have Z. Okay. And the first time I happened to be a mergers and acquisitions lawyer previous to that, so I had some big picture experience. But the first time somebody tells you that they don't really love your business is like them calling your child ugly, right? I mean, it's a whole experience. So you try to say to yourself, okay, what are the things that actually drive investors to do something? When I say investors, I don't want us to think that we're just talking about venture capital. This could be friends and family. Could be a colleague you're asking for $25,000, right? It could be, and I want us to understand that hopefully a couple of the things that I'm going to talk to you about today are what really make a difference. Some of them are strategic and some of them are tactical. Okay. And I want to try to touch a little bit of both. What I'd like everybody here to do is to chime in is if you're in the process right now of raising money, if you've never raised money before and it freaks you out, like we said last week, it is definitely like being on another planet, right? Different language, different this, different that. But you are subjecting your whole business to scrutiny. The other thing I'll tell you is this is all types of investors face two kind of complementary challenges. One is they want to find investments that are exciting to them. And two is they get 1,000 things put across their desk, right? So think about how strange it is. There's capital out there to be had, right? And yet they're turning down 999 out of 1,000 of what they're looking at. Well, why is that? It's because of the nature of the world we live in, right? If somebody came to you and said, I'm going to create a pizza shop, right? For your first reaction was, well, there's lots of pizza shops. It would have to be really good and different, right? So there's this very strange dichotomy of there's people looking for investments to make, but they're rejecting virtually all the ones that are coming across them. So they want to find them, but they're trying to say to themselves, okay, what are the ones that I should be investing in? So let me give you some thoughts about it. When you think about what gets an investor to go, yeah, and to go, yeah, in the context of a company that, like all of our early stage companies, are flawed, right? They're all dogs with fleas, is really getting them to be like, huh, right? That, is a famous quote from Clive Owens, who discovered Whitney Houston. They said, used to get these demo tapes back in the day, right? Demo tapes from every artist on the planet. And you've picked out, Whitney Houston and these artists that became iconic. He's like, how did you know which ones? And he goes, I tap my feet. They're like, what do you mean? When I play the music, I tap my feet. That's what happens with investors. All the technical stuff behind it comes next. They got to go, huh, right? So I'll take you back to my days of rewarding people for being healthy. We would say, for every 10 pregnant women that don't follow their prenatal care, it costs the healthcare system $1 million, right? You end up in the hospital, your kid ends up in the ICU. And you're like, well, why wouldn't you just pay these people? Why wouldn't you pay these, in my example, 10 women to follow their prenatal care if it's going to cost them $1 million, right? And people go, huh, And then you go, yeah, there's all this stuff behind it, right? There's a technology and model and all that kind of stuff. The first thing you've got to be able to do is you've got to be able to get them to say, okay, this is a big market, and big is relative. Like, big doesn't have to be trillions. It could be in Rochester, New York, it's big, right? Or in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, it's big. It doesn't have to be Facebook, okay? But it's big, right? And you have some unique approach to it, right? Some, we call it a playground where nobody else is playing, where they're like, huh, that's a different way of going about it. And finding that different way is hard, right? We talked about last week, just in a cluttered world where there's always more money and more competition, finding that different way is a difficult thing to do. When investors get that, they go, oh, wow, I want to be a part of that. Okay. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what it means to actually find that unique approach, because I can say all fine and good, it's a unique approach, but what does that actually mean? So go back to my health rewards days, right? There were loyalty platforms all over the place. This is around 2000, right? Airline, credit card, hotel, right? We just applied it to healthcare. Okay. Now, when you say it and you hear it, you're like, yeah, it sounds pretty simple, right? But you're finding, again, big market, unique approach to the market. The other two things that I think are critical that we talked a little bit about last week, which I'll just reiterate here, is number one, any traction you're getting, right? And remember, when traction comes from third parties is when it really matters. If you get up there and say, we're awesome, right? How many companies, early stage companies, stand an investor and don't say we're awesome, right? It's when that awesomeness is validated by something, some third party. Okay. That could be a customer you've won, of course. It could be a cool advisory board member who brings credibility. It could be getting your name in the paper, right? It could be an employee of stature has joined your organization, right? These are all validations of your awesomeness. Now, of course, we would all love to have 100 marquee customers, right? And just be able to put up a slide in an investor deck and say, these are all my customers, and then it's all easy, but that's not the way it is. But this part about traction, okay, what I want to tell you is that every single founder stands up in front of investors and say, we are awesome, right? And they also say, our customers love us. Okay. Now, I don't know about you, if you've ever bought accounting software. Nobody loves accounting software. No offense to the CPAs that are on the call. You love your dog, you love your wife, you love your kids. And so when we as investors talk about our awesomeness, right, and our traction, right, we should say, talk to these third parties. Don't listen to me. Talk to these third parties. And in the beginning, you don't have that many third parties. Don't get me wrong, right? It might be the Iowa Gazette that mentioned your name, right? No offense to Iowa, but right, you've got to be able to. But investors are used to having founders come in front of them and say, we're the best. Okay. Next, the same thing exists with your gaps. Okay. Some founders go in and say, we're awesome. We're going to do great. We're going to beat, name your big company. Right. I just got off a call about a week ago with somebody from MIT that said, we're creating betting technology and we're going to beat DraftKings. And I was like, well, DraftKings gives away $500 to everybody who signs up for a new account. So, okay. That's not what founders want to hear. That's not what investors want to hear. What investors want to hear is you understand your spot and where you are. You understand what you have to overcome, and you have a specific plan to get there with their money. Okay. So for example, a typical example is team, right? A lot of times when we go to investors, right? And I would have you take this philosophy, even if you're going to ask your dad or your brother for $25,000, right? These are the things that make for a good company. Do I have a big market? Do I have a unique approach, right? Do I have validation of who I am? And do I have a team, right? When you go and you talk to an investor, how often do we all have the team? Never, right? We never have the team. what we should be saying is, I, as the founder, have this skill. I'm a technologist, I'm a fashionista, I'm a chef, I'm a blank. And with your money, I'm going to bring in X. You know, part of the money is going to be used to bring in a head of marketing or a head of sales or a head of operations or whatever it may be. Okay, because remember, part of what investors are investing in is the idea and the opportunity, and part of it is you. And if you go in there and you say, I'm a fashionista, but I've never sourced products and I've never sold products, but I can create amazing clothes, that's not enough, right? And so part of these techniques, and Victoria, let's make sure we direct everybody to the learning community, because the section about investing has a lot of these things. These are kind of the techniques that make a difference. Is this creates great credibility with investors. They go, oh, this person knows their gaps and has a plan, right? And this person doesn't go up there and tell me they're awesome, which, by the way, I stopped paying attention. Think about when somebody comes to you and says, I have something to talk to you about, and it's awesome and amazing. You're kind of like, okay, right? So you're trying to create the market size. You're trying to create this unique approach, which we're going to talk more about. And we're trying to create validation with third parties, not from you, right? And then finally, bringing up proactively your weaknesses and your plan to address them. Okay, now, of course, if they don't like your idea and they don't like your market, those things don't matter as much. But those are the types of things that make investors move. Okay, I can tell you that the company that invested in my healthcare company at a very early stage, I wouldn't say concept, but pretty close, was an incredibly rigorous Series B, which is a further along venture capital firm that brought in outside consultants to evaluate us, outside finance consultants, technology consultants, to basically essentially give us an enema to determine if they were going to invest. And eventually I just said to them, I said, listen, I was like, this is a big, complicated business with huge opportunity. If you think rewarding people for healthy behavior is going to move the needle, you should invest in us. If you don't, you shouldn't. And I don't want to say they overlooked, but they typically would have said, well, you're not further along and you're not this. And they broke all of their rules and said, I'm going to invest in this company, even though we were a tiny company. What I'm saying to you is, if you compel them with your market and your approach, they will figure it out. It's like for any of you that have bought a house, if you're like, I want that house, you're going to figure out all the rest of the stuff that goes with it. You got to get them to want the house. Okay. V, I'm going to stop there. I know you had a bunch of questions because I want to go into some of the finding your playground stuff in a minute, but let me stop there for a sec.
Yeah, so a couple of questions. How early is too early to start looking for funding?
It's never too early. Many entrepreneurs have spent many years trying to build their business on their own backs. And at times it's better to bring in more funding. So here's what I would say. A lot of it depends on your goals. If your goals are to do something big, right? Sometimes it's worth getting funding right away. Okay. And you should start working right away. If it's something, okay, I want to bootstrap it along and my goals are, they're not huge yet, but if you want to create Facebook, you can't do it, right, by doing it by yourself. There isn't a magic answer to this, okay? What I would say to you is when you set your goals and you say, this is where I want to be financially or otherwise, that dictates how much funding you need. Hey, I want to open up 3 donut shops in the first 2 years. In order to do that, I just need a certain amount of salespeople. I need a certain amount of marketing. And you build that plan, and that plan will tell you, well, I'm going to lose money for a year and this and this. And so that means I need $200,000 to do this. And then you may say, wow, that might be hard to do. And I change my plan, but it's never in a vacuum, right? It's always tied to the specific goal that you're trying to get to, which frankly, many early stage founders don't actually set that goal. They don't actually say, I want to make $100,000. I want to open three donut shops. And when you don't set that goal, how do you build a plan, right, to ultimately get to that goal? But it's never too early to be thinking about the role that capital plays, because as we all know, sometimes great ideas are just limited by the bandwidth of the founder.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and another question, I'm going to rephrase this a little bit. If it's not a technology, right, company, are there limitations to the type of business that can go raise money?
Absolutely not. There's this misnomer on the planet that the only businesses that get funded are venture capital technology businesses, and that's just not the case. In fact, I'll hazard a guess, I don't know the exact number, 90% of the businesses in the United States are not technology businesses. They're restaurants, they're right. There's clothing stores, they're nail salons, and it is now the type of investor you go to really matters, right? If you go to a venture capital investor, they're not going to invest in a pizza stand. But there are tons and tons and tons of local investors, angel investors that look for nuts and bolts businesses that show them how they can make a profit. I'll give you an example. Recently worked with a couple of veterinarians who are creating basically self-inject technology for your pets. So let's say your pet needs vaccinations, right, or other therapies. Instead of going to the vet, you basically just buy an injectable and you inject the pet, right? Aspirational idea, industry-changing idea. At the same time, they're operating and creating labs where you can go and get testing done for your pets, because right now that's not that easy to do within a vet experience. The labs is very nuts and bolts. We've all been to a lab, right? It's nuts, bolts, it's operations, it's not technology. It's literally like a little bit more sophisticated pizza, like a pizza stand. They were able to get their nuts and bolts labs business funded quicker than their aspirational business, because people go, oh, so you spend $250,000, you open up one lab, within a year, this is the revenue and the profit. It's nuts and bolts, but it's sometimes more tangible.
Right.
Right. Think about my healthcare business, right? It's rewarding people for being healthy. It's technology.
Yeah.
I don't have a building or a
Right.
right or other assets. So every business can raise money if it's a good business, but you have to have the fundamentals we talked about, good financial plan, all the other stuff.
Gotcha. Thank you. Natalie, I see you.
Yeah, my question was, is it easier for like products based? Because mine is a service based business and I don't really see so much like investors in like service based businesses.
No, Natalie, I don't think there's a difference between product-based business and service-based business. Remember, each of them have goods and bads, right? Service-based businesses, if you get ongoing contracts and relationships with them, they can tend to be very, very good, right? Obviously, if some of those services are all human beings, right, where it's all, like a consulting business or other, right, it's more difficult to scale that, right? You got to add more people. But in products-based businesses, a lot of times, the customer acquisition and retention and repeat business challenge is there, right? I might buy something one time, but how do I keep them going? So I think a lot of times people come out and talk about investing like there's one rule across the board. It really comes down to, do I have a market? Do I have a unique approach? And does my financial plan show that when you give me your money, these are reasonable assumptions that you're going to make about how revenue is going to grow, how you're going to manage expenses, how you're going to build the team, right? And you can debate those assumptions, right? Hey, when we provide this service, we've got to add people, right? Oh, okay, well, you're going to add people ahead of time, or you're going to add them after you already have demand. So I don't think it's harder or easier. Certainly in the venture capital world, technology-based businesses are more in favor, just because there are, the margins and the cost structure is just a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you. All right. So I have a couple of more questions, and folks, don't be shy, jump in, ask questions. Want this to be as interactive as possible. All right. So actually, Salvatore and Kimberly, this is yours. It's really good. How can and this is a little bit in line with what we're talking about, right? How can I price our service? In our case, it's a trade secret that comes with a rental system so that I'm valued enough. We tend to undervalue the services. Is there a strategy to test the market?
Victoria, could you read the first half of that question? You just broke up for a second.
Oops, sorry. So how can I price our service? In our case, it's trade secrets that comes with a rental system so that I'm valued enough. We tend to undervalue the service. And is there a strategy to test the market?
Yeah, great question. And this relates a little bit to the finding a playground where nobody else is playing. Here's what I would say to you. If somebody came to us with a product or frankly, even a service, doesn't everybody believe that somebody else can create that product or somebody else can create that service and maybe do it cheaper or faster, right? So why is it that you would value a particular product or service? A lot of times it's the know-how that goes behind it that can't be copied, right? I've used the analogy before that if somebody says, I'm going to go jogging in a neighborhood and your friend says, oh, be careful, there's a pothole a block down the street, right? It's the knowledge and the know-how that makes people go, I want to buy that product or service, and places value on it. Okay, so I'll give an example, another example from the pet business. There's a company that I've mentioned before called Whisker Docs that provides you a subscription to get all of your pet questions answered. So this is either self-service online, they have all these great algorithms, you can talk to a vet online, and the people that they would sell to would say, and this is the same thing for investors, they'd say, well, why am I paying a lot to buy this service, right? It's just a call center and some people on the phone, and I can copy all that. This was a big company. And we said, yeah, but you don't have the know-how of having cared for these pets and the issues that they have. So one time there was a pet that had something happening that didn't seem like a big deal, right? But our client knew that it was a big deal and they rushed him to the hospital, whereas normally they would have been like, okay, no big deal. So the know-how behind, Salvador, your solution and how that know-how is embodied in the solution, is what make people go, I want to pay for that, and frankly, pay more for that. It's not the product or service, right? Because a lot of times there's great products and services that people, we included, we actually don't pay attention to the differences between one product or service. Okay, we really have to, in our go-to-market strategies, the way we talk to investors is when they believe there's a bunch of know-how in there, right? So I'll give you an example. Let's say today I wanted to start another rewarding people for being healthy business. Okay, now, nearly 20 years later, there are tons and tons and tons of businesses like that, right? And if I went to them and said, if I went to somebody and said, hey, and they didn't know me from anybody, right? And they said, they'd be like, well, listen, Michael, we like the idea, but it's being used everywhere and there's tons of vendors. And I said, but there are 10 things that if you do them wrong, you're going to get sued. And I know those 10 things just because we're involved in all of them, right? Even if I have the same technology as somebody else, that know-how, right, is what has to come through with customers, with investors, so they go, wow, the people that are taking me into this market, again, market big or small, right? I need to be with those people, and this is the founder that I want to invest in.
Great. And another, so Tyreen, this one is one of yours. How to fund your business, right? And I think, Michael, this goes into a little bit when you start to look at investors, right? The first question that always pops into entrepreneurs' head is like, how much of my company do I have to give away, right? So two part. One is outside of kind of investors, right? They're angel investors, there's friends and family. What other things can people think about when thinking about funding your business? And then how do you approach, how much of my business should I give away?
Sure. So let me address the first one, and there's a bunch of great stuff in the raising money section of the learning community on this. I'll just give you a quick layout of the different types of investors, right? There's friends and family, right? These are obviously people who much less formal. There's goods and bads of friends and family. Like we all have family, we know the goods and bads, right? Just think about it as if your company is on the dais when you're talking at Thanksgiving dinner, because that's what it's like, right? So it's easier to do, but there's stuff that goes with that. There are then angel investors that tend to invest. They're people that are regularly investing. There's angel networks across the country. It's easy to go online in your city and say, name your city an angel network, and they'll be in there, and you can pitch to them and do all that stuff.
And these are people that generally invest less than venture capitalists.
Yes, yeah. Now, don't get me wrong, there can be some big ones, but I generally think that you're talking about, $25,000 to $1 million, and maybe even less, but normally, 50, 100, type of thing. Then you're going up to, your kind of first level of venture capital, right? And these are folks that are investing $500,000, $1 million. Sometimes it's called seed capital and or Series A capital, and then you're going up into more sophisticated venture capital companies. One of the other financing sources that is often needed, but isn't still great, are banks, right? Banks have not done a great job. For those of you who applied for bank loans, they have not done a great job of coming up with tools to help small businesses, because a lot of times they want 3 years of financials where you made a profit and you have a building, and who has that, right? The last one I want to mention, because I think it's become much more prevalent in the last year or so, is grant programs. There are great grant programs throughout the country, especially for entrepreneurs of color, but for all kinds of entrepreneurs, where you can go get $5, $10, even $25,000 from grants. That is either could be local to your community, could be from your local bank, or even could be for your industry. Okay, so look locally, and also look in your industry for different types of grant programs. Obviously, with grant programs, you're not giving away any of your company. With all of the others, you are. Here's what I would say: there is no magic answer to how much of your company you give away. Let everybody understand the math. Let's assume that, for argument's sake, your company is valued, the valuation of your company is $1 million. Now, how you get to that is a whole other thing. It's pretty simple math. Somebody gives you $100,000, your company's valued $1 million, they get roughly 10% of your company, okay? The hard part is, how do you determine the million, right? You're saying it's got all this potential in X and Y and Z. So I'll give you a couple of different things. One is, if you build out a 3-year financial plan, right? That financial plan shows when you're going to start to earn money, right? And that money that comes out of the business, somebody can look at and say, okay, in year 1, they're going to make 20, in year 1, they're going to lose money. In year 2, they're going to make 100 grand. In year 3, they're going to make 600 grand, right? And somebody can get a look at those numbers and value it, right? And do what's called a discounted cash flow analysis and just kind of value those things, okay? But, and this is a big but, those are all projections, right? We don't know those for sure. And investors know that projections are projections. So oftentimes there's a vehicle that has been created that's called a SAFE. It's called a Simple Agreement for Future Equity. That's what SAFE stands for. What a SAFE does is it allows you not to value your company today. Instead of arguing, well, my company, I think it's worth $1 million, an investor says, well, I think it's worth $200,000, makes a huge difference. It's really hard to do that at early stages, right? Because you don't know, while you're trying to be, genuine about your projections, you don't know for sure. And that debate is a legitimate one. So what a SAFE allows you to do is the following. The company never gets valued in the beginning. So let's say you put in your $100,000 in my example, and it basically goes into a placeholder, okay? And it stays there until the next time your company is valued. Okay, well, when's the next time your company valued? It's normally another round of investment, right? So that next investment comes in, your company gets valued at $2 million. That $100,000 that kind of stayed in La La Land now converts to own a piece of the business at the valuation that was created in that next financing, minus a little bit of a discount. So instead of being 2 million, it might be 1.6 million. Okay. But what a SAFE does, it's very quick, it's very commonly used, and it avoids the need to value your company today. I'm happy to talk to people more offline about it, but it's very commonly used by early stage companies.
Irene, did you have a question?
My question is, how do you determine how much money you ask for?
Great question. That all goes down to Tyrene, when you set your goal about where you want to be, right? Mm-hmm. And then you build your income statement for each, let's say 3 years, right? So if you say, okay, in year 3, I want to make $300,000 a year. Okay. Year 2, I'll make 100. Year 1, I lose money or I break even, whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. When you build that plan and you say, okay, for me to make $300,000 a year, I have to sell $1 million of services. Okay. to sell $1 million of services, what do I need? I need some marketing, I need some sales, I need some operations to support it. So that financial plan over that 3 years, when you lay that out, right, and you put all the detail behind it, it shows you, if that's where I'm trying to get to, this is the money I need, because I'm going to invest all this and pay for all this. And for me to get there, to have my marketing, my sales, my operations, I need a certain amount of money to get to that goal.
Okay.
Right? So it's dictated by that. Now, a lot of times people will say, my goal is to change the world, and I'm going to change the world, and I'm going to make $1 trillion. And then when they look at it, they go, you can do that. You just have to get $50 million today. And they go, okay, maybe that's not so realistic.
Mhm.
Don't get me wrong. People like Facebook got $50 million day one because they convinced people the idea was good enough. But for a lot of us, the key is, how do I create a plan? Because remember, this financial plan is, you're going to an investor saying, with your money, this is what I think is going to happen. Okay. But you're working backwards from your goal, right? And I know what we do a lot of times is, when we say to somebody, what's your goal? Create a great company, employ some people. Those are okay, but they're not really goals. What an investor wants to say is, I want to open 1 pizza stand, 4 pizza stands, 5 pizza stands, because when I get to 5, I'm going to make $300,000 a year. And again, money doesn't have to be the only goal, but this is the way investors think about stuff. If to do that, for me to open 1 pizza stand or 1, vet lab for pets, I need, right? For every one I open, I need $200,000 to open one, right? And here's the revenue that will come to offset the costs. I do that. I put it all in the blender, and I look at my 3-year financial plan, and it says, I need $1 million today.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So you have to kind of connect those dots. When you're asking for, I would say that even when you're asking for friends and family money, right, you should have that financial plan. Right? As we all know, friends and family a lot of times invest in the founder because they know about you, know you, care about you, think it's a good idea, and they don't need all that. All of us who are thinking about raising money have to have the discipline to build a 3-year financial plan. It doesn't have to be the most complicated thing in the world, right? But it's got to be a plan that ultimately, right, shows them, okay, these are the things that someone's going to do, right, over the course of a multi-year period.
Okay.
Okay. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool.
I mean, we keep going to those goals, huh?
I know, right?
No, it's a good thing.
No, definitely. Okay. All right. Who else has questions? I think I saw a couple of more hands, if I'm not mistaken. Don't be shy.
I could ask a paraphrase if nobody wants to go.
Go for it, Kimberly.
Well, I have to restate what I've heard to try to help me make sense of it. So I've heard Michael say this, and he says it so well, and I'm like, yeah, I get it. But I'm like, wait a minute, can I say this? So it's, investors want to know, he's basically saying, do I have a market? Do I have a unique way to reach them, which means a playground? Mm-hmm. And then I forgot the third thing. There were like three main things.
The 2 other things are, have I shown some traction in some way, shape, or form, some progress, and who's on my team?
Okay. Who's on my team? So it wasn't like, do I have a playground? It's like, have I shown some traction, which is similar?
Yeah, the playground is really your unique approach to it, right? Okay, I get that the healthcare market's big, but what's your unique approach to it, right? What is the way that you're going to stand out from others? And that's the hardest part.
Right. And then showing traction, that you're referring to
progress with customers, right? Cool advisors that have joined your team, right?
Okay.
Your name in the paper. Right.
The third party people you're talking about that are going to say I'm wonderful.
Yeah, I'll give you a great story. Back in the days of my company, the healthcare company, somebody called us up and said, I just wanted to know, you guys won an award. We were a 10-person company at the time. And they're like, you were named the #1 new consumer healthcare app for whatever year it was. I was like, oh my God, that's awesome. I didn't even know we were up for this. And we started putting that in our marketing and talking to customers. And about 2 years later, I was in a bar at a conference with the publisher of that magazine. And I was like, that it was really great. We didn't even know we were up for it, whatever. The circulation of that magazine was like 1,000 people at the time. We didn't even know. It was this tiny magazine.
Sure.
But this validation by third parties, right, stood out, and made a difference. So.
Right. Okay.
Right. Those just become minor details, right? It's just all about the way somebody else.
Is anybody right now actively in the process of raising money?
Tyrene, a little bit.
Yeah, semi. So it's so crazy that today was this topic because in April, I'm supposed to go pitch to, it's kind of like a Shark Tank. And I'm supposed to go and I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to say. So yes,
You're going.
I say.
You're going. We're going to help you. So
thank you.
Right.
Got it. But I want you guys to all understand that think about what investors hear all the time, right? They're always hearing, we're great, we're awesome, we're going to change the world, we're better than X and Y and Z. And so some of the techniques I think will help, but I want to spend, I know I have a short time left. I want to make sure that we spend some time on that second piece, the finding a playground, right? Because I say that and I give some examples. They don't just jump off the page. Like rewarding people from being healthy. Now we say, of course, but back then nobody did it. Nobody was thinking about it. You would never reward people for things they should be doing, right? So when you think about these things, I want to give you a couple of techniques to think about when you're trying to find your playground. First and foremost, it can't just be different sprinkles on the ice cream cone. Remember, if you're a yoga instructor and you're like, well, I've shifted online. Well, who hasn't shifted online? Right? It's got to be something, almost completely different. Secondly is that whole idea of know-how, right? We can all copy anything with money and technology. If Apple cares about something, they can do anything. Okay. What you can't copy overnight with money and technology is know-how, right? Think about all of us when we walk around our houses, right? And we're like, that step's broken and the thing, like that picture could fall on somebody at any moment. Like, right? What you've got to help them understand is that in a market that's big enough, you've got a know-how that's going to win. Okay. So I'll give you an example. And I've used this before. So we gave a speech for an international PR firm. So these are international travel consultants, probably 50 of them, basically done travel PR throughout the country. So really sophisticated in stuff throughout the world. I know that industry very, very little. And we were talking about this idea of finding a playground and know-how and knowledge. And we said in Dubai, which Victoria and I and members of the Lonely team have had the pleasure to travel to a couple of times. The tallest building in the world, the Burj Khalifa. Do you know that no Americans are allowed to stay on the hotel in the 7th floor of the Burj Khalifa? And I was just listening and watching, and everybody in the audience is kind of talking to each other, and a couple of them are like raising their hands, and I was like, does anybody know why that is? And somebody raised their hand and said, a bunch of stuff, and I was like, I completely made that up. But for a minute, you were like, I better have that dude, because I was about to book my client on the 7th floor of the Burj Khalifa, right? So it is that know-how that you have to bring forward. So, and I think it was Salvatore. So you can't just be copied. Anybody, even patented technology, right, can be copied. Okay, there's enough money and enough capital, and as we all know, we can do development offshore for like everything can be copied. It's the know-how that goes behind it, right, that makes all the difference in the world, right? So if any of you seen the tragic Tiger Woods accident, probably the reason he survived is they've created technology that looked at how the cab of a car stays intact, right? The know-how that went into that.
Yeah.
It's not the steel, right? So in every one of our businesses, and sometimes I want to make sure that because I'm a technology guy and I raised a lot of money and all that stuff, don't think I'm talking about just Facebook here. I'm talking about every one of your businesses, even if you're just doing something locally. It is the know-how that makes a difference. Think about if you go in, we used to go into stores and you go into something and you're going to spend a lot of money on a dress or a lot of money on and somebody says to you, a salesperson says to you, I wouldn't wear that dress. I wouldn't buy that dress for that function because of this, right? You immediately go, that person knows something and that's more valuable to me. So in a really, really highly competitive world, okay, where you can always find something cheaper.
Yep.
Right. It's the know-how and showing remember, this applies to customers and investors.
Right.
That you
Absolutely.
spend so much time there that you're the company to invest in because you're bringing in a unique approach based on what you know.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's definitely all our company is. That's the only difference we have is the know-how.
Yeah. And I would say that it's the only difference everybody has in this day and age, right?
Yeah.
Is, so when you think about this, finding this unique approach or finding this playground where nobody else is playing, you got to look left when everybody's looking right.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
You know, I'll give you another example. Speech pathologist. There's 1 million speech pathologists. Under COVID, it's an incredibly challenging field because people can't do occupational therapy at home.
Right.
We've taken that speech pathology person, and instead of competing with everybody else, they're providing speech services to parents that have brought their kids from India and China and Dubai to private schools and teaching them to be better at the English language. Completely different approach, right? Playground where nobody else is playing, right? And so if they went to an investor and said, I'm a really good, awesome speech pathologist, but nobody would care. If they go to investors and say, look at all these parents spending all this money on private high schools and private education, and yet while their children can speak English, they don't speak it at the level they should be speaking it at in order to be successful, for example, in a United States company.
Yeah.
Okay, so looking for different places, looking for how your know-how comes through, okay, is incredibly important to finding these playgrounds. If you are going to sell, I'll use this example, hair jewels. I know somebody that's doing hair jewels, actually jewels that go in your hair, right? She's like, I'm going to go sell them through salons. That would be the last place I would sell them. Why? Because that's where every other hair care product is being sold. Okay. So how do I find a demographic, in this case, affluent women, right? Where I can sell them hair jewels, but I'm the only game in town. Again, I don't want to make it seem like this is easy. When you find your playground, when that speech pathologist found their playground, they were like, yeah, like what I said in the beginning. Yeah. Right. And even when that's in your local market, you got to try to find that unique approach to it. Okay. I'll give you another example. And a company that a lot of excitement has gotten around. This is an optometrist. Okay. As many of you may know, huge pressure on that business, right? They used to make a lot of money on lenses. There's huge competition from Warby Parker and all that stuff, and just harder and harder and harder to make money, even when they're really busy. The eye insurance companies have reimbursed less. It's a challenging market. And so we were talking a little bit about, it happens to be in Texas, about sports and how there's parents out there that spend almost anything for their child when it comes to sports. I'll make them stronger. I'll make them faster, right? I'll make them in better shape, right? We're talking, Texas high school football stuff, right? And we said, well, wait a minute. And he has this whole thing where he actually believes that improving people's eye coordination and eye performance is super important to athletic performance. So now we're saying, wait a minute, You're investing in strength and fitness and speed, but you're not investing in their vision, which is so critical to it. Okay, completely different approach. So if you're an investor and you go, I'm a good optometrist, they go, okay, great, there's a lot of great optometrists, but you're addressing this big market. Nobody is going after that playground.
Yep. And I think we have another question from Natalie.
Yes. Okay. So my question is like, what's the best way to develop your pitch? Because I feel like I'm having a hard time finding the words. Like I know my know-how. I know who I want to serve. I found like a unique way to sell my services, but now I'm just having a hard time with like putting the words together.
Yeah. So Natalie, we're going to send you a pitch deck template. Okay. And literally what it says on the pitch deck template is on this page, no more than 10 words about this.
Okay.
Right. Because here's what I'll tell you. If you put 100 words on it, nobody's reading it.
Yeah, no, what I actually did, my initial one, I'm sorry, you're like talking to my name here. Here I am. So the face to the name. So what I originally did was said what I actually do for the people, but if they don't understand, I'm starting to see like if they don't even understand why that's important, then who cares?
100%. So think of it this way. If somebody could take 20 years off our life, I don't care what the how is, right?
Exactly.
And remember, it's a really good point, Ali. We're all very invested in our how. Remember our baby. We know everything about our baby. We know how it was created. And we think that as long as everybody understands how good the baby is, they'll be interested. Nobody cares about our babies. Right?
Exactly.
What they care about it is they make me 20 years younger. They deliver me some result that, and you're showing me how, like we say all the time, nobody cares about the how until you tell them the why.
Exactly.
Right. And again, that's what the why is where you really have to find your playground. Right. In that example of the high school parents, they're spending all this money on making their kids faster and stronger, but they're not optimizing their vision, and your kid's going to fail, right? Or not be optimized unless so they're going, oh man, I better write that check because I'm writing a check for everything else.
Yes.
We're not optimizing. So, but I think what this deck will do is it'll say to you, you got to do this. You got to say this in 10 words.
Okay.
So it really challenges you to hone in on the why. The other thing I'll tell you really quickly is there's a Chinese kind of technique called the 7 whys. And the 7 whys basically says is if you really want to get to the root of something, ask yourself the question 7 why. Well, people need my service. Why? Because they need it. Well, keep asking yourself why. If you do it 7 times, you force yourself to get to the real reason why somebody actually cares.
Okay.
Okay.
Got it. That actually helps a lot.
Awesome.
Great. And for everybody, I will post that in the online community for you guys to have that template. So make sure you log in and check it out.
Sorry for getting a late start today. I know our time goes so incredibly quickly. Every week we've been talking to people afterwards, talking to people in the community. Victoria, let's make sure we direct them to the raising money section. There's some great stuff in there. And also we'll make sure that the pitch deck is put up in the community.
Yeah, and folks, the online community is a great way to consistently interact with us. We're on 24/7, so please jump on and ask questions. And like as you can see, right, we're answering your specific questions as we go along each week. So looking forward to chatting with everybody. Thank you again, and apologies for the late start, just a technical glitch.